Tom Mulcair, CTV's political commentator and the former NDP party leader. Tom, good morning to you. So what was your main takeaway or takeaways from last night's French debate?
Well, I'll talk about those of us who are covering it because I work at that TV station on the French side. And, we were like kids at Christmas. The campaign was really starting. We were going to have a debate to watch and comment. So I was there before, during, and after. And I have to say, it was lively. I think that I would have to give it to Aaron O'Toole on points. It was close. Mr. Trudeau gave a good accounting of himself, but he didn't accomplish what he had to do because he's behind right now. So he had to score a knockout, and there were definitely no knockouts. You were just mentioning the fact that Singh and Blanchet spoke over each other in that part. That was something that Mr. Trudeau did so systematically, especially in the first block, the first 45 minutes, that he had to be called to order by the moderator of the debate, who's a very respected senior commentator and journalist here in Quebec. So Mr. Trudeau scored heavily with regard to vaccines and daycare, because his plan is to make a check to Quebec. But that also gives people an opportunity to say, but hold on, you've been there for 6 years and you only discovered 6 weeks before the election call that this was an important thing to do. So it reminds people that there were a lot of broken promises by the Liberals, and it did bring back full gallop the question of why are we in an election. Best line on that came from Bloc Leader Blanchet, because he let Trudeau run through his lengthy answer. Well, big decisions have to be made and we're in the after pandemic, and that's why we absolutely need to have an election now. And Blanchet simply deadpanned, oh, really? So if you had a majority, you would have to call an election now? Of course, Trudeau had no answer to that. Overall, Singh did quite well on the issues that came up, but in the last half of the debate was largely silent. On social issues, he was quite strong. Blanchet tends to talk down to people, and he did it again last night. I think that turns a lot of people off, and I think it makes a lot of his Bloc vote very soft. And I think that if we continue to see, as Nanos shows today, that the Conservatives have a real lead, like 5 points, that's starting to be a real lead. If that continues, you can expect to see, Marcia, a lot of the Bloc Québécois vote move over to the Conservatives, because it's not a question of brand loyalty in Quebec. It's, like a lot of minorities, they want to make sure that they're part of the action if a new government is formed. And I think that could work out very well in Quebec to Mr. O'Toole's advantage.
I asked an earlier panelist this question. I'll put it to you too, Tom. The fact that people are still, according to the latest Nanos survey poll, questioning why we're in this election at all, does it make you think that the Liberals could be damaged by this? I mean, you might think at this point we'd moved on, okay, we just have to accept that we're in a campaign, but what are your thoughts around that?
Marcia, I think you're completely right. I think that was the calculus of the Liberals saying, yeah, we're going to get beaten up for 2 or 3 days about calling the election, and then we'll move on to the real issues. And they thought that carpet bombing Aaron O'Toole personally and tying him to anti-vaxxers and anti-abortion types, that would work. It didn't work. And then we sensed that there was this liberal entitlement. We're just allowed to get a majority, even though you only gave us a minority last time, and they couldn't make the business case. They couldn't convince Canadians that there was a reason for it. And I'd even go to that sense when I was watching Mr. Trudeau last night, because he would constantly talk over the other candidates. He was just not respecting them or the viewers. And you sense that there is that entitlement. Why would you want to listen to anybody else when you can have Justin Trudeau? So he's got to be really careful. In the English debates, he's going to really have to change his approach, because if he takes the same approach, if he continues to talk over the other persons, the other people who are there, I think it could really work out against him.
Okay, so with that in mind, if last night was a bit of a dress rehearsal for the debates coming up next week, where do you think each of the leaders need to improve, Tom?
I think that O'Toole has to be a bit more affirmative. So having just said that I thought that Trudeau tended to jump in a little bit too much and try to dominate simply with speed, I was joking this morning that it seemed like he'd had a bunch of Red Bull before he went on the air. I think that O'Toole's going to have to be a little bit more aggressive. People were applauding, actually. It's interesting. Senior commentators were applauding what they were calling his Olympian calm, his ability to rise above the thing, to stick with his points, to answer the questions that were actually asked. But I think that next week he's going to have to get a little bit more in the fray, especially for the English debate. He'll be in his first language. Last night he laid back a little bit. It's Trudeau's first language. It's Blanchette's first language. He and Singh tended, especially in the second half, Singh really pulled back. So you could sense that there was a hesitation, a fear of making a mistake perhaps. But in the English debate, he's going to have to be a little bit more out there. He's going to have to push it a little bit harder.
All right, Tom Mulcair for us. Great stuff as always, Tom. Have a wonderful long weekend.